And good evening, hello, all my Spiritist friends. It's time for evolution. Yeah, it's right. It's time for evolution at Kardec Radio right here, every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a great pleasure to be here once again with you. And like always, please participate with us. And this is our program number 6. Okay, yeah, it's going fast. But there's a lot of information that we have been discussing. So and I'll, there's a lot of input that comes from you guys that are listening to us. The last program we dedicated entirely to address comments and questions and suggestions. So yeah, please keep participating with us. This is a weekly program at Kardec Radio. Spiritism, a closer look, evolution. Okay. And as always, at the end of each program, we put a trivia out there. It's called Spirit Trivia, right? And on the week after, we bring the results and the right answer. So let's just do that right now. Okay, so this is the question this is the trivia that we published last week, Spirit Trivia number 5. We're going to give you the link for this week's Spiritist Trivia at the end of the program. So anyhow, here was the question. According to Spiritism, which of the following is true about the intelligent principle? And everybody who responded, who participated, thank you for participating, responded or cast their answer. First option, A. The intelligent principle is independent of the material principle. And that's absolutely right. That's exactly what it is. They are independent. Matter or material principle is one thing. Intelligence or intelligent principle is something completely different. There's nothing that intersects. They do not overlap at all. So if you answer that, participated with us, thank you very much. And that was the correct answer for last week's Spirit Trivia. Okay, so for this week, we're going to study something different. So we're going to keep going. This is something we showed already maybe a couple of times, or maybe even more, maybe 3 or 4 times. It's the general idea of evolution according to the Spiritist view. The graphic that you see here today is not animated, is a final result of all the animation because we've done that already. And we just wanted to pinpoint in this graphic here, in this image, where we are going to concentrate our energy and our effort, our study today. And we are going to concentrate right here on the vital principle. We said when we presented this first time to you, we said that the vital principle is kind of a turning point. In simple words. Of course, we're going to explain today in more details. That's the goal for today's presentation. But in very simple words, the vital principle is the turning point for the spiritual principle when it learns how to infuse life into inorganic matter. That's the idea behind the vital principle. So it's kind of a graduation point if you think in terms of learning in school in our daily life here. It's an important thing. It's a graduation level. So as of this point, once the spiritual principle learns how to infuse life into the basic elements of matter, everything changes, of course. So it is now going to be able to get into the other kingdoms, get out of the mineral kingdom into the plant kingdom, animal kingdom, and so forth. This is for later. We're going to get there. We're going to go through the kingdoms in a lot of details later down the road. So the idea for today is to study and analyze the vital principle. Okay, the vital principle is described in the codification itself. Just like spiritual principle, material principle, intelligent principle, anything of these principles that were brought in at the time they came up, by 1857 or so, by the time Kardec was studying himself to be able to produce all his work, these things were difficult. They are still difficult to explain because we don't have the full ability to comprehend as it is. It would be like, for example, if you wanted to explain to your, let's say, 3-year-old son or your 3-year-old child quantum physics. Yeah, you can probably do a little bit, but you would, without using the correct terms, without using the correct flow of thoughts, it would be very hard to make anybody understand. So you can transmit, we could transmit part of the information, but it's going to be very fragmented, very broken, not because you were not able to explain. You could be able to explain, but their ability to understand, they don't have the vocabulary, they never went to school, they are 3-4 years old, so they don't have what it takes to feel all that information and to be able to internalize and analyze and understand. Same thing happens to us, and it still does, right? With some of these terms and some of these words. Vital principle is one of them. Spiritual principle was another one. With time, we've been like 160 years after the publication of the Spirit's book. So with time and supplement additional Spiritist literature, we are able to understand a little bit more today. And vital principle, same thing. We are able to understand a little bit more today than Allan Kardec's people at his time were able to. But still, it's very challenging, very complicated for us. So let's see what the codification says, again, using the words at the time it was published. So the first thing we learned when we started all of this is that inorganic matter, which has basic elements, and the basic elements, just in 1 minute, remember those leptons and bosons and quarks and everything else, and they will produce electrons, protons, neutrons, that will produce atoms, that will produce molecules, and so forth. That's all inorganic. There is no life in respect to that. So how come a molecule which has no life in it, is not a living being, it's just a molecule, it's inorganic matter, how does it become a cell, for example? What is a cell? A cell, technically speaking, it's a set of several millions of molecules put together. A plain materialistic definition of a cell is this. But there's more. It's not just grouping or approximating the cells and bind them together. There's more. There's life. The cell has its own ability to do things by itself, and that's something a molecule cannot. Okay, so what makes the molecule, which is inorganic matter, become, or sets and groups of molecules become a cell, which is organic matter, is something that is called vital principle. So vital principle is something, I'm using the word something until we go a little further down, and we're going to use a better word. So it is something that transforms, converts, and creates organic matter from inorganic matter. It gives life to things, in very simple words. That is the general idea, the general concept behind a vital principle. Okay, so how can that happen? Well, let's go back. How can something become organic matter? So let's go back to the basics. For all purposes from now on, we know that the atom today is not the smallest particle ever. But for the explanation that we need here, we don't need to break the atom down. We don't need to go to the electrons and quarks and nothing like this. We can start from the atom because we are looking at a macro world, okay? So if we go back to the beginning, to the basics of structure of matter, we have atoms. And the atoms compose chemical elements. Different atoms represent different elements, and those are in the periodic table of all chemistry studies and everything else. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people think it's difficult. I'm not saying it's not. I'm agreeing with you. Okay, so don't feel bad if you're like get scared when somebody says the word periodic table. Don't run away. Okay? We don't need to. All right, stick with us. Stay with us here. So if we go back to the beginnings, all the atoms are in there. They don't do anything. They don't have life. They don't produce anything. In order to create from these atoms molecules, and from these molecules, life or cells, as we saw before, we are using the same organic matter. You see the atoms and the molecules in a plant, for example, they are formed from the same elements that are in the periodic table. They are formed from carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and it goes. The list is long. The elements themselves, they are the same. When you jump to the next kingdom, which is the animal kingdom, the very same thing. The bodies of all animals, they contain the same basic elements. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, all of these. Right? And you jump over to the next kingdom, which is us. It's the same thing. We as bodies still have the very same basic elements. We still have carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, and so. So the elements are the same. The chemistry in its structure is the same, but there's something else that is different. So when you look at the chemical elements, they are the same. Our body is formed from inorganic matter. There's something else on top of it, but the very basic is inorganic matter. It is so that when we die, when the body dies, the inorganic matter is still there as soon as we die. The carbon atoms are still in there, the nitrogen and oxygen, and then right after the body is dead, they're going to be used for something else. They get transformed, but they are the same elements. Okay, so let's try to see how can things get modified to create organic matter. So before we go into organic matter, let's stay in the mineral world. Think about carbon. Okay, a tremendous group of carbon atoms. Important thing, you can take a lot of carbon molecules, okay, a lot of them, atoms and molecules. You can form graphite, or you can form diamond. They all use the very same elements, nothing else, nothing less. So how come are so different? One is dark and very soft. Right? So that you can write with a pencil, right? A pencil uses that. The other is so transparent, translucent, and so hard, formed from the very same one element. So you see, inorganic matter by itself can create, of course, there's a spiritual principle operating this, but inorganic matter, meaning compositions of molecules with no life, they can still produce something different. Here's an example. So if you look at this table here, this is given to us by science. It's in the book of Genesis. Allan Kardec publishes that. But this is trying to show us the basic composition of several different elements, several different substances, if you will. And you see here percentage of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and some of them have nitrogen. So let's pick one here. Sugar from cane. Sugar from cane is formed by three elements, composed by carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So is alcohol. But sugar from cane and alcohol are not the same thing. So is olive oil. And it's another substance, all totally different. In tasting, consistency, everything is different. But they use the same basic elements. So there is something the composition, how the molecules bond or bind themselves together makes the difference, although the same basic elements don't change. Besides that, there are other factors that influence in this bonding. We're not going to get into this because this is a chemistry study for chemistry, but I'm going to mention to you because they matter, okay? One is law of affinity. Law of affinity means not all the chemical elements can combine with any other chemical elements. You cannot just decide, I'm going to take this element and I'm going to put them together. Not necessarily. There's got to be affinity between them. And that's one of the laws of chemistry. The law of affinity, there's another one, which is called law of multiple proportions. For example, if you take 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 of oxygen, under the proper conditions, you will be able to produce something called water. But if you take, let's say, I want to take 5 atoms of hydrogen and 17 atoms of oxygen, can I put them together? No, because the proportion has to be in a certain way. And that's called in chemistry law of multiple proportions. Again, this is for chemistry. It's a different study, but you see, I'm trying to show the number of factors that matter. And this is only inorganic matter. Nobody said anything about life so far. And we already see that too much or so much can be done by combining chemical elements. And then Allan Kardec tells us this: the combination of 2 elements to form a third requires a particular concourse of circumstances. Okay, for example, water, vapor, right, or steam, and ice, they are all composed by the very same elements in the very same proportion, but the circumstances are different. One lives when it's very hot. One lives, or not lives, exists when it's very hot. The other exists when it's very cold, and the other exists somewhere in the middle. Okay, so the circumstance makes it happen, can create different outcomes. So, particular concourse of circumstances, whether a particular degree of heat, dryness, or humidity, whether movement or rest, whether an electric current, etc. So all of these things can impact how inorganic matter is produced. Okay, all right. So now let's start getting into organic matter. Our physical body is composed by all those elements that we spoke so far. The 4 most important elements, important in the sense that they, in quantity, the quantity of oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen in our bodies is much higher than anything else. What you see here is a list. The last column on the right side shows the percent of each element in the body. So we are 65% oxygen, and you see all the breakdown, and all the way down in the bottom on the last line, you have a lot of other elements, and all of those together account for less than 1% of our body. But if you look at the table, the 4 elements on the top, just those 4, they account for 96.2% of what our body is. Now, one interesting thing is, if we know the list of elements, the list is here, all of them, including those less than 1%, if we put them all together in a laboratory, we cannot create a human being. Because it's not only the elements. There is something else. There is a next level. There's something that operates matter that makes life possible. And if you think of all the kingdoms, mineral, vegetable, animal, and hominal, life starts here in the vegetable kingdom. Here is where the vital principle starts. It does not start with the minerals. It does not start with the animals. It starts right here in the vegetable kingdom. So at this point, the intelligent principle is able to operate and create life out of ordinary matter. And then by studying all of this, of course, with the concourse of all the spirits, giving Allan Kardec all the answers beautifully in the Spirit's book. And of course, he's a master in putting things together, putting a logic together, a sequence of questions and answers. And he did a great job. So we're going to present this to you because the order that he publishes these questions in the Spirit's book matters. It matters to us because it makes things understandable. So here we go. Question 33. Is the same elementary matter susceptible of undergoing all possible modifications and acquiring all possible properties? Before the answer, we need to understand the question. So he's asking, all the matter, can we consider just one set, or there are two sets? From here, it's going to be only inorganic matter. There's another set here that becomes organic matter, or it's all in one. That's his question, okay? And the answer is yes, it's all in one. Right? And this is what you should understand when we say that everything is in everything, meaning everything comes from the entire creation, as we saw on our first meeting. The entire creation comes from the material principle, which is just one. Everything is in there. Then Allan Kardec makes a comment to the answer from the spirits. This is what it says. This is Allan Kardec himself. Okay, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and carbon are all the other elements we consider to be simple, are only modifications of the one primitive substance. He is addressing here the idea of the universal cosmic fluid, which we discussed already. It comes down, it gets modified until we get to the planetary fluid. That's the term that I used, because on Earth, things are different than Jupiter, than Saturn, and so and so. So you see, we consider these elements, these atoms, he's mentioning 4 of them here. We consider these very basic, primitive substances, but it's not. These things are so well modified from the original source, which is the universal cosmic fluid. Okay, so let's go for a sequence of questions. Question 60. Does one and the same force unite the material elements in both organic and inorganic bodies? Before the answer, let's understand the question. He's asking, the force that is present in organic bodies and the one that's present in non-organic bodies, the force that binds molecules together, is it the same, or it's a different force? There's one force for organic things and another force for inorganic things. Answer, it's the same. The law of attraction is the same for all. So you see what the difference between organic matter and inorganic matter is not on the force that unites the molecules. That was his question. He wanted to know if that force was the difference. The difference is not on the force. So he goes to another question following this. Is there any difference between the matter of organic and inorganic bodies? Look at the brilliance of Allan Kardec. First he asks, is the force that makes it different? Answer, no. Then the next question is the matter that makes it different? See the logic behind it? Answer, it is always the same matter. So it's not the matter that makes the difference. Otherwise, the spirits would say, no, there are 2 types of matter. Those which are going to compose organic bodies and another type of matter being used for inorganic bodies. No such a thing. The answer is very clear here. There is only one type of matter, same matter. That same type of matter goes into organic bodies and inorganic bodies. And they tell us the difference. The difference is, in organic bodies, this matter is animalized. Oh, well, then Allan Kardec is going to have to ask more, because now it's becoming more interesting, right? What is animalized exactly? What do we mean by that? What does the spirit, do the spirits, what do they mean by that? Then the next question, okay, tell me the cause of the animalization of matter. What makes the matter to be animalized? Answer, the union with the vital principle. Okay, so that defines the difference between organic bodies and inorganic bodies. Organic bodies have vital principle. Inorganic bodies do not. For example, a plant has vital principle. Somehow, we're going to get there. A chair does not. Animals have vital principles. Your car does not. Okay, so that's the difference. So he goes for the next question. Now he's going to start asking about this famous vital principle. You see, the spirits in the codification, they use the term vital principle. And now we need to know more because we never heard of this before until that day. So for Allan Kardec, is a brand new term. We need to learn about it. We need to ask more. So he goes for more. 63. Is this vital principle a property of a special agent or only of organized matter? In other words, is it an effect or a cause? So he's asking, the vital principle causes something or something causes the vital principle? That's the question. And here's the answer, both. Meaning, okay, something causes the vital principle and the vital principle causes something. Life is an effect produced by the action of this agent upon matter. Which agent? Vital principle. However, without matter, the agent is not life. Just as matter cannot be alive without the agent. So they are bonded together. They kind of tie together. It gives life, the spiritual principle, it gives life to all beings that absorb and assimilate it. So you see, the vital principle is in between. It responds to a cause and it causes something else. Right? It's not the origin of anything by itself. It depends on something else. If it depends on something else, there's something else above it. So there is intelligence above the vital principle. The vital principle is not intelligent. You just don't know. Today, I wanna kill this cell. So today, I want to divide this cell into. There is no such a thing, okay? Because it's not at the level of intelligence. Okay, question 65. Does the vital principle reside in one of the bodies known to us? You see how smart Allan Kardec is? He's asking things one after the other. You give me an answer, well, here I come for another thing. By the way, this exercise, you give me an answer, and on top of your answer, I'm going to ask you something else. You give me another answer, I'm going to ask you something else. That's called philosophy. Okay, in very simple words. Spiritism is a philosophy, spiritualist philosophy, right? Anyhow, let's go back to question 65. Does the vital principle reside in any of the bodies known to us? Answer, it comes from the universal fluid. So it's not in a body. It's not somewhere that we can pinpoint. There's no location for the vital principle. Its source is in the universal fluid. It is what you call the magnetic fluid or the animalized electric fluid. Wow. Magnetic fluid or the animalized electric fluid. People, this is 1857. In 1857, electricity was a fluid. It doesn't make any sense to us, but you see the kind of vocabulary they had at the time. If the spirits would mention something about electricity in 1857, everybody would say, oh, I know that fluid, because it was a fluid. Things change, okay? So the terms have to be understood correctly. So the source for the vital principle is in the universal fluid. Going back to the first thing, intelligent principle or spiritual principle or spirit is one thing. Everything else is matter and universal cosmic fluid. What they're saying is the source is here in the universal cosmic fluid, so the source cannot be in the intelligence. It's used by the intelligence. The vital principle is used by the intelligence, so the cause is the intelligence, and it's going to produce something else, which is the effect. That's why in the previous question, they're saying it's both. It's a cause, but it's also an effect. Okay. Question 70. What happens to the matter when a vital principle of organic beings after death? So you die, the animal died, the plant dies. What happens to the vital principle? We already know that, the inorganic matter is going to be there, available, per se. We're going to talk about this in a bit. Now, what happens to the vital principle? Answer. The inert matter, meaning the atoms and everything else, decomposes and is used to form other beings. So the atoms are carbon, hydrogen, even the smaller substances, boron, zinc, and everything else, they're going to be used for other things. The vital principle returns to the universe, meaning returns to the source. And what is its source? The universal fluid. So it goes back to its source. So inorganic matter, which is our physical body, okay, what composes the atoms that compose our bodies, and these are the four main ones, they fly out to do something else. And the vital principle returns to the universe. And then there's a very interesting passage in this book by Spirit Emmanuel, where he's going to touch on vital principle. You see, this book is several decades after the codification. We knew a lot more about chemistry by then. We knew a lot more about physics by then. We understood a lot more things. So he can tell us a little bit more. He can use a different vocabulary to explain to us all about this vital principle. Let's see what it says. There is an inherent force in organized bodies. Okay, what is an organized body? It's a body formed with organic matter. It's a body that has life. So we could translate organized bodies to a living body. Let's make the vocabulary easier for all of us, myself included. There is an inherent force in living bodies which keeps cellular personalities cohesive. Okay, what are cellular personalities? Each cell has its own ability, has somehow some ability to do things. Each cell has metabolism, and it's a tiny personality, if you will. That's why he considers, he calls the cells cellular, personality, and cohesive means they are bonded together. Okay, so the body is formed by all these cells bonded together, sustaining themselves within the particularities of each organ. So the cells that form the liver will be liver for forever. The cells that compose, let's say, the brain, they will be brain forever. You will never see something like the cells in the intestine, suddenly they decide to become cells in your kidney. There is no such a thing. Because, look at this now, continuing with the text, there's some intelligence presiding over the parthenogenic phenomena of their evolution. Parthenogenetic, what is that? Is reproduction of cells. Our cells don't die, right? When a cell is going to die, another living cell is born. That's what he's saying here. The parthenogenetic phenomena replacing through segmentation, which is this division of cells. One cell dies, another one divides and replaces those. And it keeps doing this as many times as needed, as many times as possible to sustain life. So what this whole text is saying is life is sustained because there is somebody, some intelligence presiding over the entire phenomena. There is a force behind all of this. Force is the first phrase. There is a force presiding all of this. And from the same book, right after this, he says, this force is what you call vital principle. So can we define vital principle? Yeah, it's the organizing force that presides over the organic matter. Okay, but he doesn't stop here. He continues. So let's extract more from what is said. This force, which force? the vital principle, is what you call the vital principle, a fundamental essence that, look at what it does, regulates the existence of living cells, and in which they constantly bathe. So the living cells are in a pool, okay, in simple, very simple words. Thus, finding their necessary nutrition in this pool presided by the vital principle, the cells will find their nutrition. And this is a force that belongs in all spots of the organic universe. Meaning, what is my organic universe? Is my physical body. So, and there's a boundary to my physical body. It's called skin. There's a boundary, okay? You have two, each one of us have a boundary to our organic universe. Within the organic universe, so the boundary is the skin, the membrane. Inside there, every single spot is filled with vital principle. So now that brings us something interesting. If we take a cell or a group of cells out of the body and put into a culture, let's say in a chemistry lab, put in a culture with enzymes and everything in a petri dish, what happens to those cells? They no longer belong to my organic universe. They will respond to the enzymes and everything else that, the chemistry people are able to do to keep the live cell alive. But they do no longer obey to my perispirit. They do no longer obey to my vital principle because they are no longer part of my organic universe. That's a very interesting thing. That's very interesting. That's a very supportive, I would say, piece of text from Spirit Emmanuel, in addition to what Allan Kardec had brought us many decades before. And this explanation from Emmanuel ends with this text. It doesn't really end, it has a little bit more, but for us today, that's enough. The vital principle, he's trying to put a global definition of what is a vital principle, if you will. The vital principle is the agent between the spiritual body, which is the source of energy and will, and the passive matter, which is inherent to the higher faculties of the spirit. So you see, the spirit knows how to operate the vital principle, and that's what makes life sustainable. When there is no vital principle, the body is dead. So all the basic elements that compose the body, all those atoms and molecules, they all go back to nature. They're going to do something else. They're going to be used for something else. So that's what I wanted to bring to you today in terms of vital principle. There's a lot more information in some of the Andre Luiz books, but it's about the same that we compiled here. So I try to, first of all, through maybe, at least that's what I'm trying, right? A better or easier vocabulary, trying to, make things a little easier if I can. And I really encourage you to go to the Spirit's book. On those questions, there's a subchapter called Vital Principle. Read into that with care, and put your mind to it. You can get additional information on the book of Genesis, Allan Kardec, Genesis. There's a whole section about vital principle in chapter 11, Spiritual Genesis. There's a whole explanation there. He talks about all of this that we spoke, and in different words, he's trying to bring a little bit more information. But yes, don't miss it. Going back to the beginning, spiritual principle, intelligent principle, vital principle, those are words and terms that we use in Spiritism all the time. And sometimes we don't really we're not careful enough on how to use them. We're using, not exactly the right way. So, yeah, I urge you to take the time and study that um, as much as we can. Okay, so yeah, I know you're waiting for the trivia, right? Okay, here we go. You can go over here for our Spiritist trivia. Okay, if you go there right now, you're going to see it has been published. I just did while I was talking to you. I did it. So I encourage you to participate. Here you have the link, evolution.spirittrivia.com. Cast your answer. Once again, we do not collect whatsoever. We do not collect email addresses, names, IP addresses, no cookies, nothing like this. Okay. So go ahead and cast your vote, cast your answer. If you're on the computer, you can use the QR code on the top left of your screen. And I really would like you to participate with us. Okay? Make us all learn. Okay, we are all here to learn, myself included. So, okay, that's our program for today, right? All right, time to stop. But evolution never stops. We'll be here next week with our program number 7, Spiritism, a closer look, evolution. I'll see you then.